It's time now for French Connections, our weekly look at the intricacies of life here in France with Florence Villeminot.
Hey, Jeannie.
Hey, Flo. Today we're going to focus on the world of French cinema, something that's known here as the seventh art. There is a real love and pride of movies in France, which is, after all, the birthplace of cinema.
Absolutely. The first commercial screening ever happened here in Paris. That was on December 28th, 1895. And over 120 years later, the silver screen is still booming here in France. France is, in Europe, the biggest cinema buff. In fact, it has the largest number of movie theaters, over 2,000 across the country. Paris alone has the highest density of cinemas in the world, including some really cute tiny art house cinemas that rerun old classics. Now, it's safe to say that French people love going to the movies. Over 200 million cinema tickets were sold in 2018, and that might be surprising given the rise of streaming and video on demand, etc. But many French people are purists and say that the silver screen experience is unique.
You're really inside the film. You can't get that at home.
These are works of art, I hope. They were made to be watched on a big screen, not slouched on my sofa on a tiny screen with the phone ringing.
If I see films with my kids, we go to the movie theater. I want to teach them the pleasure of watching a movie on the big screen, the quality of the image, and the patience that one must have to watch a film to the end.
And the French don't just like to watch films, they love to make films. And it's true, French cinema is so respected around the world. And if the film industry here is so strong, it's due in part to protections that are offered by the French government.
Because cinema is the crown jewel of something called the exception culturelle, the cultural exception, which might sound very pompous, but it's actually a state policy that's been put in place since the 1950s to protect France's cultural heritage. Now, the underlying idea isn't that French culture is superior, but that culture is exceptional, and therefore it should not be treated like any other commodity at the mercy of supply and demand. And for the movie business, that means that it must be defended as an art. Cinema is an art in France, and it must be defended against what? Well, the steamroller of free trade, global capitalism, and American dominance, also known as Hollywood.
And there's even a French state agency whose only purpose is to manage the production and promotion of French movies.
And that is our acronym du jour, the CNC, a very powerful and prominent agency of the French Ministry of Culture. Now, CNC is the National Center for Cinema and Moving Images, and it has a honeypot of money that it distributes to all sorts of film-related things. So that can be building a cinema or also financing all sorts of films and TV shows. Now, in 2018, it had about 730 million euros at its disposal. And where does this money come from? Well, essentially various taxes, including a levy on the sale of cinema tickets. For each cinema ticket that is bought or sold, you can see it here, 10.72% of the price goes to the CNC. So if your cinema ticket costs you about 10 euros, which it increasingly does, over €1 will go to financing French films, regardless of the film that you see. So if you go see a Hollywood blockbuster, well, you're actually going to help finance some art house, smaller budget French films that probably would not have gotten made otherwise.
And of course, adding to the cachet of French cinema are all the wonderful film festivals that we have here in France. There's an animation festival in Annecy, the American Film Festival in Deauville, and of course, the biggest film festival in the world, the Cannes Film Festival, which is partially funded by taxpayer money.
And the Cannes Film Festival is indeed one of the most exciting cultural events on the calendar in France, and it is intense. Over a 2-week period, all the who's who of the cinema descends on La Croisette, the seafront promenade. And, there's all the glitz and glamour of the red carpet, with stars from across the world. But above all, it's a competition. Now, there's the official competition where films compete for the famous Palme d'Or, the Golden Palm Award, but there are all sorts of other competitions on the side. For instance, there's Un Certain Regard, La Semaine de la Critique, Director's Fortnight. On top of all that, it's a business world. In fact, the Cannes Film Festival is one of the largest film markets in the world.
And with so much of the world's attention on Cannes, the festival is also an opportunity for statements to be made, and those famous red steps that everyone goes up every night can turn into a very political stage.
It can get very political indeed. In 2018, for instance, there were 2 high-profile red carpet protests, if you will, targeting the world of cinema. First of all, 82 women led by Kate Blanchett, who was the head of the jury at the time, essentially they locked arms on the red carpet to protest against gender inequality and the pay gap in the cinema industry. Now, why 82 women? Well, at the time, that was the number of women directors who had been selected in the official competition in its, at the time, 71-year history, compared to 1,688 men. Now, after these women, a few days later, 16 black actresses staged a protest on the red carpet, this time to protest stereotypes, racism, and a lack of diversity in the very white-dominated French movie industry. Now, the actress behind this movement is Aïssa Maïga, one of the rare French black actresses who's had a successful career in France. Take a listen.
What pushed me was the fact that I've been an actress for 20 years now in France. I've witnessed what's gone on around me. I know many actors of color, not just black actors, who simply don't find work. And more than that, who have zero opportunities in cinema, theater, or television in France. So there's a form of anger. I've always been astounded by the sheer lack of visibility within our field.
As the French movie industry fights its inner demons, it's actually also facing threats from the outside, particularly streaming sites like Netflix, which are really challenging the current paradigm. Now, recently, a group of French directors wrote an open letter in Le Monde calling on people, and especially the French government, to remember that cinema is an art that needs to be defended.
Flo, thank you so much for that. Florence Villeminot with that look at French cinema in this French Connections. Don't forget, you can take a closer look at all of the French Connections on our website. That address is france24.com, and you can always tweet Flo with your questions at Flo Villeminot.